go over the temperatures, load, what happened, the drivers. Then we're going to get into the outlook itself, fall 2014. Again, we're going to go over the demand forecast, what our meteorologists are coming up with, some historical tide flows, go over some transmission outages, what you expect there. There's one big HQ outage I want to talk about specifically. Then we're going to go over some generation, some gas information, then some retirement. A brief summary. All right, getting into the recap. So here we have the maps for each of the months over the summer. As we can see, June was slightly above average. We did get some heat there in New York. It looks like it was mostly out there in the west of the state and the north. Coming down into the east and the south, it was in line with average, but still running a little bit hot for June. July and August, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, was pretty much a non-event. Very, very weak temperatures compared to what we usually see. Overall, very weak load. Not a lot going on. It was much cooler than what we've seen the past 3 summers. Overall, this was pretty much in line with Genscape's forecast. So here we have the precipitation, slightly wetter than expected, but we do not believe that the increased precipitation was much of an impact on the power markets. So here we have the prices over the summer. As we can see there, June elevated slightly above the other months as the heat was coming in slightly more than expected, also coming in well above the previous few years. Also, another thing to note here is that Zone A finished really about $0.25 below Zone G, so we did have a good amount of Zone A congestion coming in through June. And then again, just looking at these numbers, looking at the other months, overall was a very bearish summer. Again, that was driven primarily due to weak temperatures, resulting in weak load and demand overall. So here are the actual demand numbers. Again, we can see June the closest in line with the previous years, everything else coming in a little weaker. And then here, again, it's just a graphical representation of the last slide. And here we can really see the step down, especially for July, and then the overall bearish summer that we did have. Looking at some gas pricing, again, historically weak gas pricing, especially if you look at Z6 2014, very, very cheap gas. Now, the weak gas price was just driven by the fundamentally weak demand. So with no heating load to speak of in the summer, we do look for power to drive most of the demand for natural gas. And once again, with the weak demand, we did see very weak gas prices. So that pretty much sums up our look back for summer 2014. Again, if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to me specifically, or you can go ahead and type something in the box there, and we'll get to it at the end of this presentation. So now looking out at fall 2014, we're going to go ahead and take a look at what our Mets are coming up with some expected weather and some demand forecasts. So the overall expectation is there will be an El Nino event will lead to a warm and wet fall. Going off to October, it does look like the above normal temperatures will be primarily isolated on the East Coast. So that will be, Zone J, Zone K, Zone G will be seeing some slightly warmer temperatures. Overall, that will lead to, again, very weak demand. It will limit most of the load there. Going into November, again, above normal temperatures, pretty much isolated in the north of the United States. So that pretty much encompasses all of New York, so pretty much across the board. Looking for some normal temperatures. Once again, the outlook is for very, very weak demand coming into this fall. So here's some historical fall demand. So we do have September on there. So one thing I should have mentioned, this primarily will be looking out at October, November, as September is already behind us, obviously. But looking out there at September, October, November, we do expect the load this fall to come in below the last 3 years for both October and November. If you were to put the September 2014 bar up there, it would be one of the taller ones. We did have about 21 gigs. That was due to a heat wave that came through in early September, actually sent the strongest demand we saw for the entire year was actually in the first week of September, so not technically in the summer. which was strange and really just speaks to how weak the summer was overall. So you will see a skew for September that is not expected to carry over into October and November. Once again, with those El Nino events driving warm temperatures, we are expecting weak demand. Now we're going to get into the historical tide flows. So here we have the October 2012-2013 comparison. A few things I want to highlight for you. So if you look at the IMO AC number, you see a very big jump between 2012 and 2013. That's driven primarily by the retirement of Dunkirk, so that loss of quite a bit of generation out there in Zone A. A lot of it also has to do with what's going on out on Ontario's side, increased solar and wind energy. Overall, just making their power a little cheaper so that they get a more favorable spread by flowing into New York. So the story there is that we do expect the strong flows that we saw in 2013 to continue into 2014, and we do expect 2014 to look much more like 2013 than it did for 2012. Now going and taking a look at here at November, some more things I want to point out. So we do see New England AC switch there. We do expect to be exporting out to New England. That is just starting to see the winter patterns taking effect there. Just expect some stronger flows out to New England as the winter does tend to hit them a little sooner and a little harder than it does hit New York. So this is pretty typical. Looking at the PJM AC, so similar to what I was talking about with the IMO AC in October, we see a very big variance between 2012-2013. Last year, in 2013, there was an outage at Branchburg-Ramapo. That's a very large tie line. It's the largest tie line between New York and PJM. That was on outage for the majority of the month. So that drastically limited flows, not only physically limiting the flows as that line was down, limited the TTC between the two interfaces, but also just made for less favorable pricing. So overall, we did see very, very weak PJM flows last year. There are no outages like that planned between PJM and New York. As a result, we do expect the PJM flows for this upcoming November to be closer to 2012 than they were to 2013. And I suppose another note that I should say about the New England flows, obviously we've seen very, very strong flows out to New England thus far this year. That has been driven by an outage on New England's side. They are without their phase 1 and 2. So once that line does come back, I believe on the 17th, we should see the flows out to New England pull back a little bit. Plus there are some upcoming outages that will kind of rearrange that dynamic as well. So now we're getting into transmission outages. This is not at all an exhaustive list of all the outages, interface derates or line outages we are expecting this fall. This is just highlighted by the ones I felt were the most important. These are organized by days on outage, so the top one has the longest duration on outage, and this is excluding a HQ outage. I will talk about that later in this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and move that back for now. So first of all, just starting off, we do have some back to Niagara derates coming up. So that is going to derate that IMO AC down to about 1,200. This is pretty important for that Zone A congestion that we've been seeing. Now 1,200 will be the new limit on those outage days. So we have November 2nd out through early December, and then we have another one coming up, 10/10 out through 10/24. So with those outages, now 1,200 in the day ahead is more than enough to make drive some Zone A congestion as power coming in on a 345 kV system does tend to be the main driver there. However, it will do a little bit to minimize the day ahead versus real-time congestion risk, as it will limit IMO's ability to flow really strong in the real time, and we do see that drive some strong real-time congestion from time. Other outages coming up, so we do have Long Mountain, Pleasant Valley, that is going to derate the New York, New England tie line there, so that comes down the 27th through the 15th. One thing I should note about that here is that this is shown from the import limit, so imports from New England will be limited down to 500. That could become a bit of an issue later in the month. Actually, it's very unlikely that it will push that limit. It's just something to be aware of. Overall, it could be a slightly bullish factor for New York. Now the export limit during these outages is only derated by about 300. So all things considered, for today, that would have pushed the limit of exports into New England, and that would have been bullish for New England. But again, we are exporting very heavily because they are without that tie line. That tie line does return the 17th, and when that tie line does return, I do expect exports to New England to decrease by quite a bit. So overall, these do represent risks, but I doubt they will be drive any significant upside to either region when the time comes. Look now, we have Athens, Pleasant Valley. That is a upside zone G risk. We also have Gilboa Leeds, that one on the bottom there. That's going to be a pretty significant Central East D rate from the 20th through the 26th. So we could see some upside zones, F3K, just some shadow presses being driven by the D rate of that interface there. Going down to the bottom box there, we do have just line outages. Now these are separated because they're not associated with any sort of interface D rate. They are just single lights going on outage. However, we can see there, Niagara Packard, we got two 115 lines. They are already down. They came down on the 29th. Now these are going to be out for 93 days, all the way till the end of the year. These lines are strongly correlated with upside zone A congestion. Tend to have a lot of the congestion out there, lines going out on our 115, 230 system. So while these lines are on outage, I do expect zone A volatility. So I think that's one of the bigger takeaways of this fall is the ongoing line work out there is expected to continue. It will continue to impact the transmission grid out there, and we will continue to see a lot of zone A volatility both day ahead and real time pretty much throughout the entire fall. Erie to South Ripley and South Ripley to Dunkirk, those lines coming in and out, those do affect PJM flows into zone A. So while those lines are in, we actually usually export out to PJM. So as those come in and out, we do see the congestion come in and out following it. But once again, that 93-day, those 93-day Niagara Packard line outages are the most actionable line outages we are going to see, with the exception, of course, of this HQD rate. So we can see up there, Chattahoochee and Messina, that's going to be coming down on the 4th, so coming up, and it's going to be out all the way through the 26th, and it's going to completely cut off our HQ import, AC import. So typically this month, or I should say last month, that was flowing about 1,200. So the loss of those HQ flows is essentially the same as the loss of about 1,000 megawatts of base load, as that power is very reliable and relatively cheap. So with the loss of base load, first of all, we're just going to see stronger heat rates across the entire state, regardless of zone or regardless of congestion. We should see some stronger heat rates, as we are basically without one of the largest generators. But it's also going to mix up the way power flows across New York, the way we would typically see. If you look in the bottom left there, back in October of 2012, the exact same line went out on outage. And you can see the disruption of flows over Central East versus Dissinger East. Now, typically, Central East flows are well above Dissinger East flows, as they do include power coming from HQ, also quite a bit of generation in Zone C, but primarily power coming over from HQ, flowing directly into Marcy and then crossing over the Central East interface there. So with that down, that does do a lot to limit the variance between Central East and Dissinger East flows. Now, typically, if just Chattahoochee and Messina was going down, it would be a increased risk of Dissinger East congestion. And that is definitely true for this upcoming outage. With the Central East no longer binding, or with the variance between Central East and Dissinger East diminished, that does increase the risk that Dissinger East will actually hit its limit before Central East, and that is a very strong downside congestion risk there if Dissinger East does start to bind. However, something to look at here is you can also see that Messina to Marcy is coming down, and that's going to derate Central East by about 660 megawatts. So overall, I do expect that Central East does continue to bind before Dissinger East and limits a lot of the risk of that downside Dissinger East congestion. So overall, I don't expect the flows to completely switch as they did back in October of 2012. But I do expect that spread to tighten. It does increase the risk of downside zone A congestion, but overall, with Central East being derated as well, I do think Central East remains the dominant constraint between those two. But I do actually think that this is a large upside zone A congestion driver. because while Central East is being derated about 660 megawatts, we're still without about 1,200 megawatts of flows, or basically the equivalent of a generator, as I was saying before. So that's going to increase the pull on Zone A generation, increase the output out of Niagara. Again, that is evident by the increase in flows over Dissinger East, as the cheaper generation out there in Zone A, the imports coming in from IMO, some of those PJM tie lines that go in there will increase to take advantage of the loss of HQ and make up some of that generation. So with Niagara pushing out more, with more power coming in on that 345 kV, and those outages on the 115 that I stated in the earlier slide, that is going to continue to drive Zone A volatility mainly to the upside. So in summation, the change in flows and the increased flows over Dissinger East does represent a slight downside Zone A congestion risk. However, with the derate of Central East also occurring, I do expect that Central East binds before Dissinger East, which will limit most of downside risk. Overall, the main risk is upside, as Niagara, IMO, and some of those PJM flows will attempt to, or I should just say the IMO and the Somerset, Niagara, everything out there on that 345 will increase production to try to make up for the loss of flows, and that will drive increased Zone A congestion, especially with the ongoing line outages on the 115 and possibly some 230 line outages as well. So moving on from that, getting into some generation outages, some upcoming gas constraints. So just taking a look here, this is a shoulder month, so we do see increased generation outages to go along with the transmission outages that we are seeing. So here's just an outlook for October. This is from the NYISO. This is their average forecasted gen on outage. We can see it gets strongest through mid-October. So increased heat rates, continued generation on outage, that will increase also some real-time variability as well. Then getting into gas, we do have a derate of the TGP pipeline coming up 10/20 through 11/5. So that will increase the price of TGP gas. Now that does affect New York, as some generators out there in Zone F do price off that TGP, but main impact will be in New England. That stronger gas will lead to some stronger mass hub clears, which will increase the flows out to them, could increase the Central East congestion in New York. So it's overall bullish for both New York and New England. We did see a similar outage just a few weeks ago. We saw TGP make a bit of a run there, and the flows out to New England increase following that. This derate is less than the previous derate we did see a few weeks ago. I think it's only about half the impact. So we don't expect the same gas run, but there definitely will be a noticeable increase in the price of TGP gas and the mass hub clear during this outage. Going into some generation retirements, Selkirk, it's about a 400 megawatt plant out there in Zone F, was set to retire. However, that has been canceled as of 9/3. They were able to work something out, so that unit will stay on and continue to generate as normal. They are going to be mothballing a Ravenswood on October 31st. It's a small, about 42 megawatt unit. It's a jet out there, very low capacity factor, doesn't run often, pretty negligible impact to the grid. So we have been getting some questions about the possible return of Danskammer. I don't have very much information on that. I have read a few things that they're hopeful to maybe start producing some power around mid-October. We do monitor that plant on Power RT, and we have not seen anything out of that plant since they've been doing their testing. It was an old coal generator that went down during Sandy. They're refiring it on natural gas. So that's the update. I do not expect that they will be able to bid into the market for any of the remainder of 2014. It seems very unlikely to me. Definitely not bidding into the day ahead. There is a chance they could get some runs in the real time, which would be a bearish factor, of course. Once again, we do monitor that plant on Power RT, so you will be able to see if they do come in. So anybody interested in trialing that trialing that Power RT product, please let us know. So in summary, again, demand is expected to be very weak. We are going to have very mild temperatures, pretty warm for the fall. Overall, will not translate into any substantial heating load or any substantial cooling load. Expected to be very weak. Congestion, continued Zone A volatility, lots of ongoing line work. import flows, so we will be losing those HQs. That's going to lead to higher heat rates, more flows over District East. And overall, I do expect that to be continued upside Zone A congestion risk with a slight chance of downside Zone A congestion risk if dysenteries were to bind. I think we would need an additional outage in the dysentery East area to derate that interface before we would really see any shadow pricing coming from the dysentery East interface. So that is everything I've got for you. Here's all the information. If you would like to talk to us further, if you have any questions you would like answered offline, to request any trials of our product. Again, my name is Stephen Baden. I am the lead New York analyst here. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to give it a few minutes. If you guys have any questions you want answered now, go ahead, type those into the box. I'll be back in a couple of minutes to answer those. Thanks. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So once again, if anybody has questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thanks for joining me. Again, you will be receiving a recording of this Outlook and the slides shortly, hopefully later today. Thanks. Bye.